Listen. So the South by Southwest Film Festival went online this year, following 2020's event, which was one of the first big cancellations before the whole world was paused, but they found a way to press play, and we got the chance to catch over 70 movies. Sure, I still missed the tacos, the weather, the scratch and sniffs, and spirit cleansings that they were holding at screenings, but overall I'd say that it was still a pretty solid lineup for 2021. Let me explain. So starting off with the shorts at South by, it was cool to see a nice variety of stories. The director of Little Gray Bubbles, which was one of my favorite shorts from a couple years back, came in with a new one called The Moyel, which follows a new dad searching for a rabbi to trim his son or have him trim his own traditions. There were really great animated shorts like Navozande the Musician and Nuevo Rico, which follows two siblings who harvest the power of reggaeton. There were a couple of great horrors with creepy creatures with domestic undertones, and also haunted video game ones that I really hope Nintendo doesn't claim because, well, that one's still up on YouTube right now. There were great dramas, there were great thrillers, comedies, and of course they came in with the docs. Beyond the Model was a very timely one, which also won the Texas Award. There was one about the secret bathrooms in the Trade Center, but it was HBO's The Last Cruise that comes in as our number 10. Now, this one is pretty long for a short, clocking in at 40 minutes, and even though it is a doc, I'd also say it kind of serves as a thriller. Hannah Olsen, who also did HBO's Baby God, follows the passengers and crew of this cruise line that had one of the biggest COVID outbreaks. She intercuts people on vacation, those working in the kitchen, the docks, people who were scared, and those who felt they were just inconvenienced. It delivers on the anxiety of that trip as you're watching and waiting as real people are getting infected, and you know that it's only going to be a matter of time before Hollywood turns this into a quarantine-type blockbuster where people are going to be getting infected in the ship one by one before the credits. Directed by Michael Bay. Summer Animals was inspired by the families who are living in and out of motels and how in Texas, the heat becomes yet another thing you need to try to escape. It follows three siblings on a hot summer day as the eldest tries to find a spot for them to cool off. And I say that this would make a great double feature with I'm Fine, Thanks for Asking, which also played as part of the feature narrative competition. It won the jury award for the Texas short, and it's playing On Topic, which, yes, it's another streaming service that people are subscribing to, costs money, but hey, they have good stuff. Are You Still There is a quiet 15-minute story about a young girl who's stranded in a strip mall parking lot after her car battery dies. And while it is a pretty simple premise, it builds up as you learn more about Sefa and her past, her interactions with the people around her, and I thought it was beautifully shot and would highly recommend it. Sales Per Hour was a short that was pretty jarring, but thanks to the power of virtual cinema, I was able to play it back and figure out what was going on, and damn, it's nasty. It takes place at a clothing shop where an employee realizes something and has to decide whether completing the sale is more important than standing up to a customer, and it leaves you pretty livid. So while I can't recommend it to everyone, it was definitely effective at placing you in the scenario of an employee facing that moral dilemma, to which there is a clear answer to. Doretha's Blues is directed by Channing Godfrey Peoples, who did last year's Miss Juneteenth, and here she directs one of the best performances out of all the shorts in my opinion. It follows a blues singer who finds herself at a bar, venting, they're drinking, but it builds up to a finale that absolutely hits. Our Bed is Green is an animated short about this VR facility that data mines whoever you want so that they can virtually appear in front of you, and then I guess they charge you by the hour or something. I know this was the director's thesis, which she also animated and worked on the score for it, but I found it to be a very intriguing animation, not just with its style, but just learning about the character and realizing why she's doing what she's doing. Stuffed is a short musical about taxidermy involving a human. In my top 3, there's Soak, that revolves around a 16-year-old who's trying to get her mom to come back home after she's left them. I think it's beautifully shot. It's got a very subtle script. Both performances were fantastic. And at a $10K budget, I'd love to see a feature done by this team. Play It Safe takes place in an acting class where Jonathan gets typecast for a peer's play and then has to do an acting exercise that challenges everybody in the room. It's uncomfortable. I've seen people say that they don't like it, but in my opinion, that's because the filmmakers didn't play it safe themselves. Putting the Sundance shorts that also played here to the side, the best one I caught at South by would have to be The Box. It's an incredible hybrid short that follows people who've spent time in solitary confinement, retelling their stories through reenactments and stop motion that evokes the disparity they went through, and it is compelling. compelling. Visually, I don't think any short on this list touches it, and there are testimonials that really embody the severity of the situation and what it's like to be subjected to the box. One of the directors is even someone who spent time in the box, and honestly, whenever there's a short that you're willing to see as a feature, you know it's a must-watch. Now, in terms of the docs, South by was stacked. There were several music ones that followed Tom Petty and the making of his album Wildflowers. Under the Volcano showcased one of the most iconic studios that's now covered in ashes. Demi had a tea shop and she was spilling. And Charlie XCX had a really cool doc that was breaking down her Quarantine album and how collaborative it was with her fans, even jumping on Instagram to workshop some lyrics. The Lost Sons followed a dude investigating his kidnapping as an adult, while Oxy Kingpin shined an obvious light on who's running the opioid epidemic. There were docs on the field labor being kept up by the kids of those workers, luchadoras from Juarez who put it all on the line, but coming in at my top 10, we actually have a tie. Introducing Selma Blair, which won the special jury recognition for exceptional intimacy in storytelling, rightfully deserves it. The doc follows Blair, who reflects on her history as a prolific supporting actress, as she also gives an inside look at her life with MS.
And so I did have to tell him after the MRI, I said I have something called multiple sclerosis. And he almost cried and said, "Will it kill you?" And I said, "No, I mean, we never know what kills us, Arthur. But this is not the doctor telling me I'm dying." And he was like, "Oh, okay." And that was it.
In interviews, she talked about the difficulty of being diagnosed because doctors kept telling her that that wasn't the case. It was just her being pregnant. And at a certain point, she even reached out to Michael J. Fox before even knowing him because at least she knew that he was vocal about his condition. And so she gives director Rachel Fleet raw, unfiltered access into her life so that people can see what it's like on a daily basis. And while some docs may feel like they're editing out, certain things to capture the subject in the best lens, this one is purely honest through and through, with some shots even being caught on an iPhone whenever they didn't allow the bigger cameras in certain places. There's an aspect that contrasts the relationship between Selma and her mom, and then that of her and her kid, that I feel could have made for an entire feature itself. You see the ups and downs of seeking treatment, even as a celebrity, and her overall commentary and approach, which is super blunt and funny in the darkest way possible.
Like things people don't know. If I yell, I can push enough air so I don't have it. So sometimes when someone's looking for something, I'm like, "It's to the left!" And they're like, "Shh," and I'm like, "It's just my way of telling you clearly."
A very emotional doc, but worth it, and one that's going to be premiering on Discovery Plus. Through the Plexiglass is my other number 10, which follows Liz Lambert, who bought the San Jose Motel in Austin decades ago in order to repair it, and it documents all the different characters who she hosts there. A lot of the intimate moments with her tenants, all of which she caught on her camera back in the day.
I never expected to be engaged in the lives there. And thank God I was.
Just one night? Got that phone.
As director, producer, and the one who shot it all, you get to see the relationships that she forms with these people who are just stopping by, or, they're waiting for their MTV contract to go through, people who are just living there extensively at the motel, and all of these very interesting backstories that end up clashing together. It is a very sour ending in my opinion, but I think it's a great documentation of the people who occupied South Congress and the vast changes that happened through real estate. Lily Topples the World is about Lily Hevish and her domino empire that she's created on YouTube. It's an interesting look at taking a hobby and being able to create a career out of it, with all of the obstacles that come in maintaining a massive channel while also being in the middle of school, and all the business moves that she's working with at such a young age, with points even in the movie where I was yelling, "Lily, don't take that deal. Topple it." It's a fun little doc that could have shown a little bit more of her domino struggles and especially the creating of, but it explores the new generation of content and how a lot of old heads still haven't caught on to it. The hunt for Planet B revolves around the Webb Space Telescope that's 100 times more powerful than the Hubble as it searches for life in space in order to make contact.
I wanted to make a science film that didn't feel like a science film.
I personally loved how, while it does follow scientists, it's subtly capturing humanity. Like, you're hearing what inspires each of them to join the project, how they move in the world, their daily commutes, the struggles. It's showcasing to us how, even if we were to escape and find Planet B, it wouldn't really alter how we've taken care of Planet A. There are some great talking heads in the movie as well, like Jill Tarter, who's the astronomer who inspired the movie Contact, and she has a fantastic line about switching one's perspective from being less about what we believe and more about what we can explore. The idea of working as a collective to achieve things beyond us.
We've hardly begun to look. In 50 plus years, we've observed only about 1 hot tub's worth of the ocean. Maybe it's not so surprising that we haven't detected anything yet.
That said, if we ever do make contact, man, are we screwed. We Are As Gods is a documentary that I actually had the chance to catch as a part of last year's canceled South by, but they brought it back to screen in 2021, and it still delivers. It documents Stuart Brand's career and influence, and how he pushed the government to show the first picture of the entire Earth, how he wrote the whole Earth catalog that inspired the likes of Steve Jobs, and while they take the time to debate his environmental views, which I thought was a good thing, the concept of reviving species, which he was really big for, it does practically settle on the fact that, yeah, this man is never going to see the results of his life work in his lifetime. And still, he has a very overly optimistic look on technology, especially when dealing with genetics, which is where the title comes from.
We are as gods, so we might as well get good at it.
So if this interests you, then I recommend doing a double feature with this and Human Nature. Clerk is all about Kevin Smith, and if you're a fan, it may just feel like a recap, but it is a pretty complete one with self-critiques and all. From him selling his comic collection, maxing out credit cards, and putting it all on the line to become a Sundance darling, to his personal journey right after his heart attack. It's a nice inside look at Smith as a creator, collaborator, and a person who realizes that his success doesn't come from the gatekeepers who saw him as the indie flavor of the week, but the fans who related to his voice and chose to listen. Not Going Quietly follows Adi Barkan, an activist who in his early 30s was diagnosed with ALS, which only pushed him to fight for more healthcare reform in America.
Like so many of you, I have experienced the ways our healthcare system is fundamentally broken. Enormous costs, denied claims, dehumanizing treatment when we are most in need.
From his personal journey on becoming a father and the physicality of that, to visiting politicians who just straight up shut doors in his face, I believe that this is a pivotal doc, but one that guts you emotionally. Dear Mr. Brody looks back at the millionaire heir of the margarine fortune who decided to give out money to anybody who wrote to him. It follows all the media attention he got, but also dives deep into those letters, many of which, decades later have been unopened, and they start reading them to you, even going as far as trying to relocate the people who sent them out. It's a Telluride selection, so you know it's got that stamp of approval, and it's even one of those docs that does something I usually don't like, but I'm gonna be honest, on a rewatch, it may not work for everybody, but it did kind of work for me. I'd recommend going in knowing as little as possible for this doc, and I would also recommend the director's previous animated documentary, Tower. Woodland's Darkened Days is the ultimate horror history introspective, and it tops 3 hours. So if you're working on a full core video essay, yeah, it's up. It's the directorial debut of Kiera Janice, who's also a film programmer and horror historian who traces the influences, effects, and tropes that have defined not just the genre, but people's psyche in certain places. It tackles a lot of ideas that have become synonymous with the genre, where they come from, how they get passed on, and even questions the term, folklore. I love the way that they ended up making it really worldwide and how things are all interconnected, and I was surprised to see them get to La Llorona, to Candyman. Like, they get so much in there. I definitely consider this a must watch. Who We Are is a lecture doc since it takes Jeffrey Robinson's talk that he's toured with, but it is a masterpiece of a lecture doc. As ACLU's legal director, he's gone throughout the country and examined the intricacies of racism, from the shackles on display at a museum where they were meant for kids, to the dude holding a Confederate flag outside, not really knowing why. It excels at chronicling the state-sanctioned oppression and how slavery in the US isn't just Black history, but America's history. And if you were one of the people who saw Them, which also premiered at South by, I would recommend watching this doc instead. It's also playing at Seattle, it's a part of the Hot Docs Film Fest, and I think it's a must-watch. Topping my list for the docs is When Claude Got Shot, which follows 3 strangers who become connected after a weekend of gun violence. Claude, who's shot by a teen, and that teen who's shot by a nurse who he later tried to rob. It's a raw look at the situation that keeps its viewpoints gray, not really picking sides, and even subverting any expectations you may have as you learn more about their backstories. It's directed by Claude's friend, which makes the access to their story even more personal. It's even produced by Snoop Dogg in his Snoopadelic Pictures, and it's one of the best documentaries of the year that I've seen, in my opinion, so far. When it comes to narrative features, there was a whole COVID subgenre that had sisters going on a road trip to rescue their grandma from a nursing home, another about quarantining at home with the person you just broke up with, and of course Mark Duplass learning Spanish through Skype and then calling it a movie called Language Lessons.
Damas y caballeros, bienvenidos.
Trapped is a tense thriller about 7 women during a revolution in Egypt. Broadcast signal intrusion follows video pirates in 1990 Chicago. Best Summer Ever is the most diverse and inclusive version of camp rock, while Swan Song stars Udo Kier in a love letter to a shifting gay culture. And then, of course, there was the meta movie about making a movie inside of a movie, pretending to be an experiment on romance, directed, written, and edited, and starring Hannalina as Hannalina.
The whole cast of the film has been part of creating the script that you will watch as a film.
Yeah, including all the sexual fantasies and nipple piercing scenes you will see.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
We orgasm together like...
Starting off my top 10 narratives, though, is the fantasy horror that follows a park ranger scoping out a lost drone, only to get lost herself. If you're a fan of Annihilation or In the Earth, I'd rank this right underneath those, as it sees nature not just as the setting, but also the villain to a degree. The people living in the forest also have their own religion in accordance to what's going on there, which includes visits by these clicker-looking beings that attack at night. Luckily, by Naughty Dog's own logic, I don't think they should be suing, but damn are they similar. I noticed a couple of biblical homages within the duo in the forest, as well as how the movie subtly plays with the aspect ratios depending on what character you're following. So if this piques your interest, I know Neon picked it up along with Decal, and it should be getting a summer release, and I can't wait to make a full LME because while I did enjoy it, man, I've got one gripe with that ending. The Drover's Wife is an Australian Western written, directed, and starring Leah Purcell, who also acted in the play adaptation of the short story. She used her grandpa's diary to inform the film and its setting, which digs at the violent history of the land as we see a single mother struggling to survive with her kids in their family farm. And I personally am a sucker for Westerns, and I loved how, even though they didn't have the biggest of budgets, they still snuck in some beautiful sweeping shots. I know it may not pique everyone's interest, and it made me notice a trope I've been seeing in a lot of Australian cinema. It's also apparent in Nightingale, but I found it to be a decent Western, and I'm looking forward to the upcoming anthology feature that Leia's also working on. Islands follows a middle-aged Filipino dude who's never left home, but he starts feeling the pressure to find a partner as his parents' health starts to decline, and it does a great job of showing the differences between cultures, especially in terms of the approach to parental care, just the family dynamics in general, and all those little intricacies that you see within the setup of the house. It's a very intimate story that's grounded by its great direction, and especially the casting that never shames its characters. There's also a part of the story that touches on masturbation, and the director, Martin Netherland, talked about the differences in film, and how when it's on screen for women, it's always hypersexualized, but for men, it's always something that's like creepy or embarrassing. And again, that's just a part of the movie, it's not the whole thing, but it showcases how delicately he treats all the material, and it's handled with such care, to the point that it even earned Rogelio the acting award at South by Southwest, and rightfully so. And I give it a solid junior price. Bantu Mama follows Emma, who gets arrested in the Dominican Republic before finding an escape that leads her to be sheltered by 3 minors who just so happen to not have a parent. Director Ivan Herrera co-wrote it with Clarice, the main actress, and they used their Afro-Caribbean and Afro-European roots to flesh out these characters, because not only does she become a maternal figure for them, but they also start relating in terms of their culture. You know, they realize certain traditions and words and foods overlap more than they think between their hometowns, and they start to converse differently. There's another feature that played at the fest called Ludi that does the same thing. It does an excellent job at showing the nuances in speech, especially as you encounter different people throughout your day and the different connections you make through that. It has some very impressive natural lighting that it uses for its cinematography, but they also use non-professional actors to play the kids, and that was a big thing for me. I thought it was a pretty solid drama that I'd give a junior price to, and this was a much better movie than the other Afro-Latino flick called Executive Order, in where Brazil passes a law to send away highly melanin Brazilians back to Africa. What the what? In Between Girl is a teen dramedy and the directorial debut from Mai Makino, which follows Angie, an artist in high school who's also in the midst of her parents' divorce and all of the changes that come with that. And then on top of that, she starts things with this Jake from Hannah Montana looking fool who may or may not be using her.
I feel like you're mocking me.
I'm not mocking you.
It leans into the awkwardness, the cringe of youth decisions, and because she's also mixed, there's all of these stereotypes that come with it, and the disconnect that she has with her mother because she's white. It's a very independent movie, shot in 15 days, but it's an awkward and heartfelt Junior Price in my opinion. Here Before stars the legend Andrea Riseborough, who never misses, and she plays a Mrs. living in Northern Ireland while mourning the loss of her daughter until a new family moves in next door, and she starts to see a resemblance in the kid. It's a slow burn, but one that explores grief as a different interpretation from person to person, not something you could judge. Andrea's acting has always been in the eyes, and her pupils get the spotlight in this one. The little girl who played Megan was also great, and it was interesting to hear that the director, Stacey Gregg, wrote Andrea a fan letter to be in the film.
I was like, hey, I think you're amazing. I've got this script. And of course, I didn't, I really didn't think that it would go the mile, but stranger things have happened. And, she was, I think she was on a shoot at the time and she said, well, look, I'll read it. And then she got back so quickly.
The Spine of Night is a fantasy epic about this magical plant falling into the wrong hands and the band of heroes that must set out to rescue mankind. And I personally had a blast with it. One of the directors has a channel where he's hosting a couple of their shorts, so if those pique your interest, then definitely put this one on your radar. They even talked about in a Q&A how there's a version of the film that's completely shot in live action before they went on to animate it, and I would love to see the behind the scenes to that. It's violent, it's unrelenting, and I thought it had some really dope characters with a solid voice cast to go along with it. Violet follows a film executive named Violet, who's continuously belittled by the voice inside her own head that just so happens to be voiced by Justin Theroux. It comes from Justine Bateman, whose brother has won some directing awards, and she herself now has one hell of a debut. It does a lot on screen visually, and it may come off too overwhelming or maybe even repetitive for some, but I think it nailed that feeling of self-doubt that drowns the main character's thoughts and causes her to second-guess absolutely everything, and it's also juxtaposed alongside this text that appears on screen, trying to be the positive reinforcement that's always getting shut out by the voice. And it was interesting to see that that text actually comes from Justine's own handwriting. I feel this one's going to hit home for a lot of people. I think it's pretty good, and I would give it a combo price. The Fallout stars Jenna Ortega and Maddie Ziegler as high schoolers coping with the fallout of a school tragedy as they're coming up on the most pivotal years of their lives. It's directed by Megan Park, who many may know from The Secret Life of the American Teenager, and thus Shailene Woodley also appears as a therapist in the movie. It's got Phineas composing his first film score for this, and while it's not a perfect movie, I think it does an effective job of handling the teen's perspective to the scenario and how each generation is affected by it. It won the Grand Jury Prize for Narrative Feature, and considering its cast and topic, there's no doubt this one's going to have a big release. Finally, my favorite narrative out of the fest is the Norwegian drama/comedy Ninja Baby, which follows a 23-year-old named Raquel who finds out that she's pregnant along with like 3 other big bombshells. They collaborated with a graphic novelist who sort of inspired the story to animate the Ninja Baby that actually comes to life and Raquel interacts with, and I just thought it was fantastic. It's a movie that challenges archetypes by switching up the character roles that we usually see in these movies and reminding you that people don't have to be pigeonholed to complete certain things before they reach a certain age. I thought it had some hysterical moments, it had a fantastic ending, and it's one that I give a high combo price to. Thank you guys for checking out this video. I'm curious to know your thoughts down below in the comment section. We do have an entire intercut that we did with Amanda the Jedi, a whole podcast breaking down every single movie that we saw at the fest. If you're curious to go check that out. We also have an LME streams that, we went through the entire letterbox ranking list that we like to do for the festivals and try to rank them in order. Obviously, it always switches. It always depends on the mode that you're in, but these were some picks that I just wanted to put on y'all's radar to see if you guys enjoy it. Maybe it's something that interests you. There is one thing I will say about South by and how everything's shifted right now, especially with everything being online. But I know that South by is always a fest that does things based not on individual tickets, but on a whole, you got to get an entire pass. So $350 to see one movie if you were only interested in one may have been a lot. And that's why I think there was a lot of docs, the Demi or the Charlie XCX docs that could have sold out, but they didn't because, at that point, you have to buy a whole pass. It's $350 just to see a movie. People wouldn't even pay that for a concert. So I'm curious to see if they evolve that, if they continue doing the online experience. I'm really big on the fact that these festivals should continue doing that, but we'll see how it evolves as, things start to open up and people are able to go back and see these movies in actual theaters. But I thought it was a pretty good fest, had some pretty good lineups, and I'm curious to see which ones stand out to you and which ones I should have on my radar. Until next time, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in Austin next year.